Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in our series of Edge of Eternities Commander deck techs. Since EOE is Magic's last in-universe set for 2025, I wanted to showcase some of the cool commander options that it's given us beyond just the ones from the precons. I'm releasing a new Edge of Eternities commander deck every Thursday through the end of September when the Spider-Man set drops, in addition to my usual Monday commander deck tech videos. So if you have a request for an EOE commander you'd like to see me build, or a way you'd like to see me build them, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today, our commander is Xu-Ifit, Osteoharmonist. She's a monoist surgeon stationed at Susar Secundi. A decade ago, her wife leapt into the Sotheran supervoid, but a sudden gravitational anomaly froze her in time. Xu-Ifit has made it her life's work since then to save her wife and join her plunge into the next eternity, her experimentation taking her closer and closer to the answers she needs. If the story of an obsessed doctor working to save their frozen wife sounds familiar to you, you aren't alone. But as someone who loved this characterization, I draw this parallel as praise. I've linked the Edge of Eternities story in the description for this video below because it's great. But before we get into the deck tech, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build around my commander. I want to show off why I think it's cool and why I put it in the command zone. So I put 30 cards toward doing what it wants me to do. That's my game plan. It's how we try to win. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and spot removal, usually is my interaction. I also run some mass removal, usually 1 or 2 wraths, sometimes more if it would feed the game plan well, sometimes none if it would be counterproductive. And I generally keep a floor of 38 lands so I can make sure that I can cast my spells and play the game. So let's talk about our commander, Xu-Ifit, Osteoharmonist. This is a pretty simple card. For 1 and double black, we get a 2/3 legendary human wizard with just a single ability. Tap, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a skeleton in addition to its other types and has no abilities. Activate only as a sorcery. So pretty simple. We want to put cards in our graveyard and we want to get them back out and make them vanilla. That's all Xu-Ifit does. And it seems pretty simple, and it is. And it's really fun. It's a strange Reanimator deck, one that doesn't care about what we bring back because our creatures' bare bones stats are more than enough. Reanimating them costs us next to nothing, meaning our opponents can deal with our commander at peril of leaving our huge value threats on the board. And if they address those threats instead, we just sacrifice them for value and bring them back right away, sometimes better than when they left. All the while, we're draining their life totals, keeping our hand and graveyard full, and harassing them with tokens and removal and sacrifice and mass recursion. And that's great, but I keep coming back to our commander's story. Xu-Ifit and her wife share beliefs so strong that they're willing to leap into a singularity together, no uncertainty or doubt in their hearts. And when one of them does, something goes wrong. A gravitational anomaly dilates time around her, stilling her fall and separating her from her love forever. What a betrayal that has to feel like. To the monoists, gravity is at the core of their faith. It's the essence of inevitability, the fundamental cosmic force that brings everything together. They sing hymns to it. And Xu-Ifit watches it freeze her wife mid-fall, stealing from her any certainty she had in the perfect future they both believed awaited them. But there's no indication that this makes her question her faith, only that it makes her get to work. She brings in acolytes, alters them, tests them, sends them out one by one to plummet ecstatically into Sothera. She refines her process with each iteration, getting closer, digging deeper, reaching through the ribcage of reality to retrieve what was taken from her. The will and drive and hope she puts into her work lays bare her heart's innermost truth. That her love shames gravity with its pull. In time, they will be reunited. Of this, she has no doubt. You'll enjoy this deck if you like interesting sequencing choices and feeling like your opponents see your threats as much more dangerous than you do until you make them sad to be right. So I want to get into the deck proper, but before I do, I want to go over Xu-Ifit's ability. I want to just make sure that we clear up how it works. There's a little bit of confusion and even some misinformation floating around the internet about her ability and the way it works, especially when it comes to copyable effects. To sort them out, we are going to go to the rules. People love to hate on the layers rules, but they're pretty straightforward in this case. Xu-Ifit's abilities apply in layers 4 and 6 respectively, adding the skeleton type and removing all the creature's abilities, like so. Essentially, you just ignore the creature's text box and add skeleton to its type line. There is a wrinkle to this, but it's one that's good for us. If we make copies of those creatures, such as with Saw in Half, we're making copies of them as they are printed, not as they exist on the battlefield. This is because the changes that Xu-Ifit makes to these creatures are not copyable, which would be layer 1. Remember, Xu-Ifit's abilities apply in layers 4 and 6. So, just like cloning a creature doesn't bring along modifications like counters or abilities added by auras or equipment, clone type effects will only copy the creature as they're printed, except, as it otherwise notes. So that means if we were to make a copy of a creature that Xu-Ifit has skeletonized, that copy is not going to come back vanilla. It's going to come back not even as a skeleton. It'll just be a copy as printed. We'll talk specifically about how Saw in Half works on it once we get to that in the deck tech. So that's the upside of our commander's ability. The downside is that Anthem effects that both confer a stat bonus and confer abilities are a little funky. For example, Death Baron here gives skeletons we control and other zombies we control +1/+1, but also Death Touch. Because adding abilities like Death Touch applies in the same layer as Xu-Ifit's reanimation ability, she will remove that added ability unless its timestamp is later than her ability's timestamp, and then the power and toughness bonus apply in layer 7 either way. I know that's a lot to go on, but the short way of saying this is that the creatures that Xu-Ifit brings back as skeletons will always get the stat bonuses from these Anthem cards, but they'll only get any abilities those cards confer if those cards hit the battlefield after the skeleton does. So if Xu-Ifit brings a creature back as a skeleton, and then we were to play a Death Baron, that creature we brought back as a skeleton will get +1/+1 and Death Touch. Because Death Touch this effect from Death Baron has a later timestamp than the ability that brought the creature back. But if we then bring a second creature back after the Death Baron, it won't have Death Touch because that would be removed by Xu-Ifit's ability, but it will have the +1/+1 because that applies in layer 7. I know it's complicated, and it's further complicated if you're already running cards that already are a creature type, which the Anthems would apply to. Like maybe you're running another zombie. That zombie is always going to get the +1/+1 and Death Touch from Death Baron because it's not something that Xu-Ifit reanimated. To make this simple, I have included in this deck no cards that have an Anthem that applies and grants an ability in addition to a stat bonus. We're just going to go ahead and get this out of here. We only have one Anthem type effect in this, and all it gives is a stat bonus. Yeah. But you do you. Check the considering section below to see so many other cards. Lots of options for people with bigger budgets or smaller budgets, or even Anthem effects like Death Baron, which I have tagged in here as synergy pieces. So, at last, let's get to the actual deck. Let's talk about Xu-Ifit and our game plan. We're going to start with a fun tag, Corpses. We've got 25 cards here, which are meant to be creatures that we can bring back with Xu-Ifit's ability and have that be effective to us. We're going to start with a great example of the rules interactions I just went over, which is Death's Shadow. Death's Shadow is 1 black mana for a 13/13 avatar that gets -X/-X, where X is equal to our life total. If we were to play Death's Shadow from our hand, if we have 13 life or more, Death's Shadow dies immediately because it's got an ability that gives it a penalty to its power and toughness equal to our life total. But when it dies, it's in the graveyard, which means we can then take Xu-Ifit, make Death's Shadow into a skeleton, and it comes back with no abilities. So it will come back as a skeleton avatar, or avatar skeleton, however you want, but with no abilities. So this penalty ability won't be there. It'll just be a 13/13 creature. That's pretty all right. That's all there is to say about Death's Shadow. It's just a classic card that is really great in our deck. Very big stats, no ability, works for me. And it kills itself when it comes in if we just cast it from our hand, as long as we don't have a very small life total. Next up we have this Rot Curse Rakshasa. This is from Tarkir Dragonstorm. For 1 and a black, we get a 5/5 demon with trample and with decayed. Decayed means that this creature's unable to block, and when it attacks, at the end of combat, we have to sacrifice it. So we only really get 1 attack out of it while it has these abilities. It also has Renew for X and double black. What that means is we pay X and double black and exile it from our graveyard, so it has to be in the graveyard to do this, and we get to put a decayed counter on each of X target creatures, but only as a sorcery. That means we're spending 2 black and exiling this from our graveyard, and every other mana we spend on this puts a decayed counter on presumably our opponent's creatures, which means those creatures no longer can block, and if they decide to attack with them, whether it's us or someone else, at the end of combat, they're going to have to sacrifice those creatures. So it seems pretty good, but in any case, the Rakshasa is a 2 mana 1/5 trample. If we attack with that and it dies, whether it's been blocked or because of the decayed ability, that's fine. We use Xu-Ifit to bring it back, and now it's a 5/5 vanilla that we only paid 2 mana for. Seems good. Next is Rotting Regisaur. 2 and a black for a 7/6 zombie dinosaur that says at the beginning of our upkeep, we discard a card. So that seems like it's an overstated creature with a downside mechanic. In our deck, it's actually an upside mechanic because it lets us take other creatures we have that we want to turn into big skeletons and just entomb them, just put them directly into the graveyard so that we can then move to our main phase after we've done this in our upkeep and use Xu-Ifit to bring them back as something big. And if Rotting Regisaur itself is in the graveyard, we bring it back and it's just a 7/6 on its own. It seems pretty great. Love Reggie. Next, from the Final Fantasy Commander set, we have the Warring Triad. This is a 5/5 legendary artifact creature god for 3 generic mana. It has flying, trample, and haste, but as long as there are fewer than 8 cards in our graveyard, it isn't a creature. But it taps, and it has an ability where if we tap it and mill a card, we get to add a mana of any color to anyone. We can do that to our opponents if we want to be a little bit political. Milling a card is great for us because it puts cards in our graveyard. It's great for the Warring Triad because if we get 8 cards in our graveyard, it's no longer, it is a creature again, so we can use it as this 5/5 flying, trample, haste. But in any case, this is a manalith that also mills us. It lets us add a little bit of black on our turn if we don't want to save it for someone else and make a little deal for that. And, as usual, and I'm probably going to end up saying this for every card, if this is in our graveyard, our commander can bring it back and it's just a 5/5. Pretty good. Now I know you're thinking, what are we supposed to do with all these vanilla creatures? Well, for example, if we look at Rotting Regisaur, we get this into our graveyard however we do. Xu-Ifit brings it back as a 7/6, and we just slam with it. We can hold it back as a blocker if we really want to, but attacking with a 7/6, even if it's vanilla, just makes people nervous. They're going to take 7 damage, or they're going to have to throw something away. And not everyone is producing a million tokens that they're willing to just chump with. So us slamming in with these big things, as long as we are aggressive with it, it's going to make people feel like those things are dangerous. So they'll want to remove it. And the moment they remove it, on our next turn at sorcery speed, we can use Xu-Ifit to bring it right back. So we don't really care about it dying and coming back. We just want to do as much damage with it as we can. So we look opportunistically at our opponent's boards and see what we can attack. But don't worry, I also have ways to bring these back as their full power. We'll talk about it soon. First, though, we got to talk about the Clackbridge Troll from original Throne of Eldraine. Love this guy. For 3 and double black, we get an 8/8 trample haste. 8/8 with haste and trample. But when it comes in, target opponent creates 3/0/1 goats. And at the beginning of combat on our turn, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. It doesn't have to be one of those goats. It can be any opponent and it can be any creature. And if they do, we tap the troll, but then we gain 3 life when we draw a card. So for the cost of an opponent's creature, we don't get to attack with the troll, but we get to revitalize, gain 3 and draw. That's all well and good, but if the troll dies, we just bring it back as an 8/8 vanilla. And if we can somehow get it back reanimated or back to our hand and recast, we get to use it as its 8/8 trample haste self again. Of course it will, when it comes back in, make more goats, but we love the Billy Goats. Next up is Gary, the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. For 3 and double black, we get a 2/4 zombie that says when it enters, each opponent loses X life, where X is our devotion to black, and we gain that much life. An amount of life equal to the amount of life lost. Devotion, if you're not familiar, is you look at your board and you count up all the black pips on permanents you control. That's your devotion. So if we had Gary and the Troll and Death's Shadow out, our devotion would be 5, because that's 5 black pips among them. So each of our opponents would lose 5, and we'd gain 5 life for each opponent who lost it. So if we have 3 opponents, we'd gain 15. Gary is great. Not a terrific thing to bring back as a corpse, because it's just a 2/4, but if we have a way to bring it back and then cheat it back in to do its thing again, pretty nice. Gary is a good example of one of the themes we have in this deck that I don't talk about that much, but we get a lot of benefit from, which is gaining life. We do care about draining our opponents, which we'll talk about soon, but part of that comes with life gain. Gary does a good job of emblemizing that. All right, next up we have a Persistent Constrictor from the Duskborn Commander set. For 4 and a black, we get a 5/3 zombie snake that says at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they lose a life, and we put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature they control. So this is kind of removal. If they've got things that are an X1, they just die, and it's at the start of each opponent's upkeep, and they lose life on top of it. But as well, Persistent Constrictor has Persist, which means when it dies, if it didn't have any -1/-1 counters on it on its own, it comes back to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter. So the next time it would die, it doesn't persist again, it just stays in the graveyard, until of course we reanimate it. So Persistent Constrictor is a good way to play the field and say, well, during, opponent B, it's your upkeep, you have to lose a life, but I don't have to put a -1/-1 counter on one of your creatures. I will if you don't make a deal with me. Or maybe you say, I've got to put one on one of your creatures, but tell you what, I'll put it on the creature that's going to take the least amount of effect from that, and let's make a deal that you don't bother me, and I'll put it on the creature of your choice on opponent C's board when it's their upkeep. You can play good politics with this, and it is annoying, but we don't have to worry about it being annoying because they try to remove it and it persists, assuming they didn't exile it. And then if they remove it again, we bring it back with Xu-Ifit, and it's a 5/3 vanilla, which is not nothing. Sir Conrad the Grim is a big player in this deck for our drain strategy. He is 3 and double black for a 5/4 legendary human knight that says whenever basically what he does is this. He does a damage to each opponent when one of 3 things happens. Either a creature dies, a creature card is put into a graveyard from somewhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves our graveyard. So as long as creatures are going into graveyards, Sir Conrad's doing a damage to each opponent. And if creature cards are leaving our graveyard, perhaps by our commander bringing them back as a skeleton, Sir Conrad's still doing damage to each opponent. He's really annoying to other people. To us, we love him. And in addition, we can pay 1 and a black, and everyone has to mill a card. So if we see someone brainstorm or do some kind of shenanigans with their top of their library, this is a great way to put that card in their graveyard, or maybe multiple cards, because we can do as much mana into this as we have, 2 at a time. But it also mills us, which maybe puts good creatures into our graveyard that we can then bring back. And every time creatures go into any graveyard from this mill effect, Sir Conrad will trigger and do damage to each opponent. Next up, we have Sir Conrad Light, Sir Conrad Bigger. Not really sure what to call the Dreadhound, but it works kind of similar to Sir Conrad, just not quite as well. But bigger stats. 4 and double black for a 6/6 demon dog that says when it enters, we mill 3 cards. So that just gets, hopefully, creatures into our graveyard that we can bring back. And whenever a creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from a library, so the first 2 triggers on Sir Conrad mostly, each opponent loses a life. This is not damage, this is life loss, so maybe that's relevant depending on if someone has some kind of damage prevention deal. But yeah, Dreadhound is sort of redundancy for Sir Conrad here. And of course, we can bring it back and it's the 6/6 vanilla. Pretty big. Speaking of 6/6 or 6 power vanilla creatures, Massacre Worm is a 6/5 Phyrexian Worm for a 3 and triple black. If it comes back, it's just a 6/5 vanilla, with Xu-Ifit brings it back. But until then, when it enters, all of our opponent's creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, either from this or any other time, it doesn't even have to be on our turn, that player loses 2 life. So Massacre Worm is a little bit of a light wrath because it will take out anything that's an X2, and it drains everyone. Just deeply rude, this card. And it's often just doing a lot of work, even on opponents' turns when they're having to attack each other. Next up, we have Spectral Snatcher. Spectral Snatcher and the next card are both doing sort of the same thing in this deck. 4 and double black for a 6/5 Spirit with Ward, discard a card, so a little bit of protection for it. But it has Swamp Cycling for 2, which means we can pay 2 generic mana while this is in our hand, discard this, and instead of cycling the normal way, which is we just draw a card, we get to look for a swamp, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. We don't have any cool type duels in this deck, obviously, because it's a monocolored deck. But finding one of our many our many basic swamps is pretty great. Just draws us a card. And by doing that, it puts the Spectral Snatcher in the graveyard, so Xu-Ifit can bring it back as a 6/5 vanilla. For 2 mana, we get a 6/5 vanilla into play and a swamp into our hand. That seems alright. Similar effect is this Lord of the Rings card, Troll of Khazad-dûm. It is a 6/5 troll for a pretty similar casting cost. A little less restrictive, 5 and a black instead of 4 and double black. It says it can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, so like super menace. And it swamp cycles for just 1 rather than 2. So like I say, these are doing similar things in this deck. Probably we're just putting them in our graveyard by swamp cycling them. But who knows, maybe we'll be casting them because we need something big. Next up is a Dread Feast Demon from Crimson Vow. 5 and double black for a 6/6 flying demon that says at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice a non-demon creature. If you do, create a token that's a copy of this creature. So if we can cast this, or somehow get it onto the battlefield when it isn't a vanilla skeleton, we can sacrifice our skeletons every turn, or any other card we may have that we want to sacrifice, any other creature, that is. And we just keep pumping out 6/6 flyers. What's great about this is it doesn't say create a token without this ability. So each Dreadfeast demon, the original and all the tokens, have this trigger. At some point, we're probably not going to be able to keep it up, but that's okay. We'll be able to, even if we don't sacrifice a non-demon, it doesn't hurt us or anything. It's not Lord of the Pit. It's just, we don't get to make a copy. 6/6 flyers all around. Next up, we have Phyrexian Fleshgorger. Love this card from the Brothers' War. 7 generic mana for a 7/5 Phyrexian Worm with Menace and Lifelink and Ward, pay life equal to this creature's power. So Ward, pay 7 life, and it's a 7/5 Menace with Lifelink? That's pretty great. And we can bring it back with Xu-Ifit as just a 7/5 vanilla. All of that is wonderful, but it also has Prototype for 1 and double black, which means if we want, we can cast this from our hand for 1 and double black, and it is exactly the same card, except it has a power and toughness of 3/3 instead, which means its ward is pay 3 life rather than pay 7. This is great because we get a Menace lifelinking 3/3 that we can attack with as much as we want, and when it dies, it goes to the graveyard, and Xu-Ifit can bring it back, and it's full powered, vanilla 7/5. And if we have a way to scam it, which we might, I'm sure you can expect we're going to have some of that. It'll come back as its full power as well. Next up, we have Runescarred Demon, just a classic. They reprinted in Foundations. 5 and double black for a 6/6 flying demon that says, when this creature enters, search your library for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle. It's Demonic Tutor. On a 6/6 flying body. Yeah, it costs 5 more mana, but that's alright. Getting this out as a 6/6 vanilla is not terrible. Using this to find the exact thing we need in that moment of the game, always great. I mean, probably we're not spending 7 mana and then DTing for a land, but you never know. Whatever you want. What would you pay for whatever you want? Plus a 6/6 flyer. I would pay 7 mana. Next up, from the Warhammer 40k decks, this is Shard of the Void Dragon. I don't know what a Catan is. I don't know Warhammer 40k, but this is pretty rad art. Shard of the Void Dragon is 4 and triple black for a 7/7 flyer that says, Spear of the Void Dragon. Whenever this creature attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent of their choice. Pretty good. I mean, they could sacrifice tokens, but they can't sacrifice lands. Seems alright. But also it has matter absorption. Whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, or is put into exile from the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. We don't have a whole lot of ways to use this. I mean, we can always have our Flesh Gorger die, but we do have some treasures, and a lot of people do these days. When treasures go to the graveyard because they were sacrificed, this gets 2 +1/+1 counters for each one of them. We've got some of that. Seems pretty good. Even just a 7/7 flyer is alright. Next up is Colossus of Akros. I think this is a really cool card in this deck. From Original Theros. For 8 generic mana, we get a 10/10 artifact golem with Defender and Indestructible. But it has Monstrosity 10 for 10 generic mana. That's a lot of mana. We may be able to get there though. Monstrosity means if this creature isn't monstrous, you put 10 +1/+1 counters on it and it becomes monstrous. So it becomes a 20/20. And as long as it is monstrous, it has trample and it can attack as if it didn't have Defender. So you get this out for 8, you pay 10 more to make it a 20/20, and now it's a 20/20 trample, indestructible. You can attack as if it didn't have Defender. It's crazy. Getting this out as just a 10/10 vanilla skeleton, also pretty good. Didn't know that this kind of golem would have a skeleton, but I guess it does. And if we're able to cheat it back in somehow, as its full stats, we can then pay the 10 eventually. Probably we can, its commander, and have a 20/20 to attack with. And then if they kill it again, we just bring it back again as a 10/10 skeleton. Next up, we have a very old card from Evasion. Devouring Strosis is 5 and triple black for a 9/9 Flampling Horror. It is flying and trample. But it has a downside mechanic. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. Wait a minute, that's not a downside mechanic, because that puts creatures in our graveyard that we can bring back as skeletons. I guess it kind of is a downside in a way, it's sort of in the middle. But it also has Regenerate It if you sacrifice a creature. So we're likely to be able to do that. We're probably going to be able to have creatures that we can feed to it for the upkeep. We can probably sacrifice creatures to regenerate it. What does regenerate mean, though? Just to be very clear, regenerate means remove this creature from combat, take all of the marked damage off of it, tap it. That's all it is. It just puts up a shield for whenever this creature would die. Instead, it taps, removes from combat, and loses all its damage. It does not leave the battlefield and return, which means if we were to find a way to regenerate it as the skeleton version, it's not going to come back. I mean, that's a lot of hoops to jump through, and it's not going to work anyway, so don't worry about it. It's just a nice 9/9 for us, or it's a 9/9 Flampler that makes us put our creatures in our graveyard, which we don't mind doing. Next up, it's one of our Eldrazi. It's Ulamog's Crusher. Just a classic 8 mana, 8/8. It's a common in Commander Masters, apparently. It has Annihilator 2, which means when it attacks, the defending player has to sacrifice 2 permanents of their choice. They can do tokens, they can do lands if they want, but they gotta sacrifice 2. And Ulamog's Crusher has to attack every combat, if it's able to. That's to say, every combat on our turn. I've seen some people recently saying, well, if it attacks each combat, it attacks on opponents' turns. Of course, that's not true. And in any case, an 8/8 for 8 is pretty great, even if it's vanilla. An 8/8 for 8 with Annihilator 2 that always attacks, we were going to do some attacking with it anyway. Next we have Artisan of Kozilek. This is another great Eldrazi. For 9 generic mana, we get a 10/9 Eldrazi that says when we cast this, we may return a creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. So just a little Reanimate. And like the Crusher, it has Annihilator 2. So we entomb this somehow, discard it, mill it, bring it back as a 10/9 skeleton. That's big. If we can somehow get it back to our hand, we can cast it. But even if we can't get it back to our hand, being able to scam it in as a 10/9 with Annihilator 2, pretty good. Just remember that the first ability is a cast trigger, not an enters the battlefield trigger. Next up, we have Demon of Death's Gate from M11. 6 and triple black for a 9/9 demon that says we can pay 6 life and sacrifice 3 black creatures rather than pay the spell's mana cost. So if we've got 3 black creatures lying around that we don't mind putting in the graveyard, which generally we will, either because they are skeletons or we don't mind bringing them back as skeletons, we can just pay some of the life we have, and this comes out without us having to do any kind of mana investment in it. And it's a 9/9 Flampler. Or we could just bring it back as a 9/9 vanilla skeleton. Seems pretty good too. Next we have Triplicate Titan. We have a couple of these big golems. 9 mana for a 9/9 artifact golem with flying, vigilance, and trample. And when it dies, it breaks into 3 pieces. We make 3 3/3 golems. One of them has flying, one of them has vigilance, and one of them has trample. Pretty neat. If we then reanimate this with Xu-Ifit, we get a 9/9 skeleton golem with no abilities. So we've got 4 golems and they're all having a good time. But if we reanimate it a different way, it comes back and it can break apart again, and we can make more little golem tokens. Next we have Ancient Stone Idol. I used this one recently, I think, in the Tannic deck, but it's really good. 10 generic mana for a 12/12 golem with flash, but it says it costs 1 less for each attacking creature. So generally the game plan is you wait until your opponent's attacking with several things, maybe they're attacking with 6 things, and then you flash it in for 4 mana, and it's a 12/12 blocker. But it's also a 12/12 trampler, so it attacks perfectly fine. And when it dies, you make a 6/12 colorless construct with trample. So a 6/12 with trample is pretty good too, especially when we can take this while it's in the graveyard and bring it back as a vanilla 12/12. Next, another Eldrazi from a more recent set, Modern Horizons 3's Commander product. 10 generic mana for a 10/10 Eldrazi with vigilance, ward, sacrifice a permanent with mana value 1 or greater, so usually not tokens, and it can just tap to make a 10/10 Eldrazi token. Just a vanilla 10/10. Pretty good, which is exactly what this will be when Xu-Ifit brings it back if someone decides to pay the ward cost to kill it, or kill it in combat. But we can use this to just have as a blocker, and then on the end step of our opponent to the right, pump out a 10/10. Just do that every turn cycle. Seems pretty good. Finally, we have one last Eldrazi, and it's Pathrazer of Ulamog. 11 mana for a 9/9 Eldrazi, but it has Annihilator 3. So when it attacks, they have to sacrifice 3 permanents. And it also has Super Menace. It can't be blocked by except by 3 or more creatures. So lots of 9/9s and better that we're able to bring back from the graveyard. These are our corpses, but how do we want to get them into the graveyard? Our graveyard section is 23 cards that will somehow put things into the graveyard. Let's talk about them. Annihilating Glare is one of our removal spells. For a single black, we have a sorcery that says, as an additional cost, pay 4 generic mana or sacrifice an artifact or creature to destroy target creature or planeswalker. Kills a creature or planeswalker, and all we have to do is pay a black and take one of our creatures and put them in the graveyard. Just sacrifice them. So we can bring that right back. Bitter Triumph is similar. For 1 and a black, it's an instant that lets us destroy a creature or planeswalker, but as an additional cost, we can either pay 3 life or discard a card. So maybe we have a huge, 11 mana creature in our hand, We just can't do anything with it in our hand. We don't have the mana for it, but we can sure discard it and now reanimate it. Plus, we've, of course, done the effect of the Bitter Triumph and killed something. Deadly Dispute, love this card. It's one of my favorite effects for this kind of thing. 1 and a black for an instant as additional cost, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw 2, and make a treasure. So that treasure is something we can use to trigger the creature I was mentioning before. But, I mean, just getting 2 draws out of this, we've got a lot of different ways to get card advantage in this deck. Deadly Dispute is an excellent one. Key to the City is probably even better. This card is so good in Reanimator style decks. 2 generic mana for an artifact that says tap and discard a card, one of your creatures can't be blocked this turn. So this just lets us put a card in our graveyard every turn and make one of our huge things unblockable. Which means either our opponent is going to have some kind of disenchant or naturalize or some kind of way to blow up our Key to the City, or more likely they're going to focus on the creature that's hitting them, because that's what there's a lot more removal for, creatures versus artifacts. And then we just bring that back with our commander and use Key to the City to make it unblockable again. But in addition, whenever this artifact becomes untapped, we can pay 2 generic mana to draw a card. So it lets us draw in addition to replace our cards we've been discarding. What a great card. Next we have Millikin. Millikin is 2 generic mana for a 0/1 creature. It's a construct. But you can tap it and mill a card to add a generic mana. So this is a great way for us to get cards into our graveyard, of course, but also it just makes mana for us. We like that. Reckoner's Bargain, another excellent one of these kinds of spells. 1 and a black for an instant as an additional cost, sacrifice an artifact or creature. You gain life equal to the sacrifice permanent's mana value and draw 2 cards. So that is a lot of mana for these huge things that we're putting out there. Generally for this kind of spell, this one or Deadly Dispute or Bitter Triumph, we are casting these spells after our opponent has already targeted our creature with some kind of removal or is blocking in a way that is not advantageous to us to let our creature just die in the process of it. So we sacrifice our creature, either get a treasure, get some life, and then we bring it right back with our commander as a vanilla skeleton. Next we have Ripples of Undeath. I went back and forth about including this in the deck. It's very good, but it's one of our more expensive cards at about $9 a piece. For 1 and a black, we get an enchantment that says at the beginning of your first main phase, mill 3 cards. Then you may pay a generic mana and 3 life. If you do, put a card from among those cards milled into your hand. So this is a way for us to draw cards every turn, but really it's just put 3 cards in your graveyard. Probably one of them is going to be one of your 25 creatures that are big and scary, so that you can then reanimate it with your commander. And if you think you could just cast that, go ahead and pay a generic and 3 life. You've got plenty of life in this deck. And it goes right to your hand instead. In addition, maybe you mill 2 good creatures and a land, and you're willing to pay that 1 generic mana and 3 life to put the land in your hand. This is just an excellent way to fill up our graveyard and our hand at the same time. Like I mentioned, though, at the start, my decks always have that considering section, chock full of cards that work for other budgets. So if you wanted to do, let's say, Cemetery Tampering for a similar effect to this, it's not quite this effect, but it sure does do this. It's a lot cheaper than $9. Next up, very old. I was playing during Alliances back in the 90s. I'm excited to see the Soldevi Adnate back. For 1 and a black, this is a 1/2 human cleric that has tap and sacrifice a black or artifact creature at an amount of black mana equal to the sacrifice creature's mana value. This is terrific because we get something in our graveyard like, let's say Ripples of Undeath has put one of our 10 mana cards in our graveyard. As long as it's an artifact creature or a black creature, we can use the Soldevi Adnate to sacrifice it whenever we feel like, but presumably we'll do it at sorcery speed, or during our main phase, that is, so that we can then take that mana and use it to cast one of our other big creatures. Just cast it rather than having to reanimate it. So it comes in, it gets all of its benefits. Pretty good. It's worth noting that we can't sacrifice our Eldrazi for this because they are neither black nor artifacts, but we sure can cast them with the black mana that we're adding from the sacrificed creature. So Soldevi Adnate, a great sort of repeatable ritual. Next up is Ayara, First of Locthwain, from original Throne of Eldraine. For triple black, we get a 2/3 legendary elf noble that says whenever Ayara or another black creature we control enters, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So a great source of drain, because remember, our skeletons are coming back and they are the same color that they were in the graveyard. So if it's a black creature, it comes back and Ayara will trigger. And we can just tap Ayara and sacrifice a black creature to draw one card. It's repeatable draw. That sounds good. Braids, Arisen Nightmare, is 1 and double black from Dominaria United for a 3/3 legendary nightmare that says, at the beginning of your end step, we may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. We don't have any planeswalkers in this deck. And if we do, each opponent has to either sacrifice a permanent that shares a type with the one we sacrificed, or they lose 2 life and we draw a card. This could be each player loses 2 life and we draw 3 cards. Braids usually gets us some value every turn cycle, and if she doesn't, that's all right. In our deck, we are sacrificing usually creatures, but we can of course sacrifice our lands if we don't need them. We have plenty of tokens that we're getting in sometimes that are either creatures or treasures or something. Sacrifice that. Yeah, pretty nice. And of course, if an opponent does not have any permanents that share a card type with whatever we sacrificed, they have to lose 2 life and we draw a card. So yeah, Braids is good. We've seen Reggie. Reggie puts cards in our graveyard by having us discard them. And now we've got Saw in Half. So Saw in Half, a couple of things about it. I did not put it into the removal section. I just want to mention that now, even though its first 3 words are destroy target creature, because we can use it for that, but it's not what it's meant for in this deck. So what does it do? 2 and a black for an instant that says destroy target creature, and if that creature dies, its controller makes 2 tokens that are copies of that creature with their power and toughness halved, rounded up. So if it was a 2/4, they get a 1/2. If it was a 1/3, they get a 1/2. Yeah, but they get 2 of those tokens. So we use this for our skeletons. If we have a big, 9 mana skeleton or like a 9/9 flying trample demon, but it's just, a 9/9 vanilla skeleton, we can at instant speed saw it in half. And it will come back as its printed form, except with its power, with 2 copies of it, that is, but their power and toughnesses will be half as much. So if they were 9/9s, if it was 1 9/9, it will come back as 2 5/5s, because we round up each time. That's a great way to surprise block, or maybe we block and after blocking with our huge thing, so that our opponent doesn't get through because maybe they don't have trample, we turn it into 2 big things, or we just wait until our opponent on the right's end step, or we do it during our turn, just depending on what we want to get out of this. Saw in Half is really powerful as a cheat card. We're calling it cheat in this deck rather than scam. Yeah, good times. Thanks, Unfinity. Next up, we've seen the Warring Triad. It can tap for mana and mill a card, so that puts things in the graveyard. We've also got Victimize, a great staple for any kind of Reanimator deck, and a lot of black decks in general. 2 and a black for sorcery that says choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard. So we have to have 2 creature cards in our graveyard. Then we sacrifice a creature, and if we do, we return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. Because of the way this is worded, you obviously cannot sacrifice a creature and then have it be one of the ones that come back. Because we start by choosing 2 creature cards in our graveyard, we can't sacrifice something that's in the graveyard already. So it also means that when we put this on the stack, we've chosen 2 creature cards. If one of our opponents doesn't, before the spell resolves, if they eat that creature, one of our 2 creatures, or both, out of the graveyard, this no longer functions. This will not resolve. But it is worth recognizing that sacrifice the creature is part of the resolution of the spell. It's not an additional cost. And you don't even have to choose the creature until Victimize is resolving. So yeah. Victimize is good. Check the rulings for Victimize before you start making a video about it. Anyway, next up we have Ghoul Caller Gisa. For 3 and double black, it's a 3/4 legendary human wizard that says pay a black and tap and sacrifice another creature. Make a number of 2/2 black zombie creature tokens equal to that sacrificed creature's power. So this is a great way for us to use our commander to bring something huge back to the battlefield, then have Gisa and 1 black mana turn that creature into a whole bunch of other zombies, and then use our commander either the next turn or whenever we can to do it all over again. Just flood the board with zombies. This is a great alternate victory condition. Sometimes 20 zombies is enough. Next up, from Original Theros, it's Rescue from the Underworld. This is such a cool card, and I love the flavor. It is an instant for 4 and a black that says, as an additional cost, sacrifice a creature. Then, choose target creature card in your graveyard. Return that card and the sacrificed card to the battlefield under your control at the beginning of your next upkeep. Then exile Rescue from the Underworld. So it's an interesting Reanimate spell at instant speed. We can do this on our opponent's turn. We can maybe block with one of our creatures, maybe one of our skeletons, and then cast Rescue from the Underworld, sacrificing our blocker, and then that card, the one that we sacrificed, and whatever else we chose, are going to come back at the beginning of our next upkeep just into play for us. What's nice about that is it is a little risky because the creature we sacrifice and the other one we chose in our graveyard, they can be removed from our graveyard, maybe with like Scavenging Ooze or something, before this happens, before the beginning of our next upkeep. But at the very least, if one of them is hit, the other one will come back. So Rescue from the Underworld is just a solid way, and at instant speed, it's crazy, to reanimate some stuff. Next up, we've got Sir Conrad. Sir Conrad puts things in the graveyard because he can mill. Dreadhorde puts things in the graveyard because it will mill. Spectral Snatcher and Troll of Khazad-dûm are both Swamp Cyclers, so they put themselves in the graveyard. Dreadfeast Demon makes us sacrifice our non-demons, so those are going back to the graveyard. Devouring Strosis makes us sacrifice a creature during upkeep, or if we wanted to, if we wanted to regenerate this. And of course, Demon of Death's Gate lets us have, it has the alternate casting cost of pay 6 life and sacrifice 3 black creatures, which in this deck is not likely to be the way that we do this, but you never know. Maybe we have a whole bunch of zombies rolling around. We want to spend the 6 life and 3 zombies to get this out. Seems good too. So those are the 23 cards we have to get things into our graveyard. So how do we want to keep them on the battlefield? We've got cheats. These are some scam cards, but not only. We'll go over them pretty quick. Undying Malice. There are other effects that work the same way. This is the one I chose because it's in Foundations. Undying Malice is a 1 black instant that says, until end of turn, target creature gains when this creature dies. Return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So if we have made a skeleton out of one of the big creatures in our graveyard, one of our corpses, we attack with it. It looks like it's going to die, either in combat or maybe because we want to just sacrifice it or we want to use it for something else that's going to cause it to go to the graveyard. As long as we're willing to pay 1 black mana first, we can cast Undying Malice on it, and once it dies, it will come back with a counter on it. It will be tapped, but it will also be as it is printed, not just a vanilla skeleton. Undying Malice, these kind of scam cards are great for this sort of Reanimator deck. You can go much harder into these than I did. Maybe that's worth doing. I think that would be fun too. Next up, we have Fake Your Own Death, another scam card from Foundations, originally from Streets of New Capenna. And this, of course, art is from Atlas of Thunder Junction. That's all the trivia I can give you for Fake Your Own Death. It is the same thing, essentially, as Undying Malice, except it costs an additional generic mana, it gives the creature +2/+0, and when it comes back tapped, instead of having a counter, we make a treasure token. So it sort of refunds us for this extra mana, and it gives them slightly more power, which is maybe relevant if we're doing something like Gisa, or if we're trying to trade in a way that it wouldn't have without that +2/+0. Fake Your Own Death is sort of my choice for scam cards if I'm going to choose it. But Return to Action is another great one. from Kamigawa. 1 and a black for an instant that says, until end of turn, target creature gets +1/+0 and gains lifelink. And when this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So, 1 more generic mana than Undying Malice, but it gives a power bonus and lifelink rather than it coming back with a counter. Seems good. And lifelink in this deck, I mean, this could be, 12 life right there. We've seen Saw in Half, how it can cheat things because it makes 2 copies of that creature, which I guess I should also mention. If we make 2 copies of that 9/9 Flying Trampler that I mentioned before, we can also still bring the 9/9 back as a skeleton with our commander, in addition to having those 2 copies in play that are 5/5s. So yeah, Saw in Half also puts things in the graveyard. Now we have 3 cards that do something even better, I think, than scamming. Golden Argosy is a vehicle for 4 generic mana. It's a 3/6 that crews for 1, which means we can tap any number of creatures we want with power 1 or greater, and this will become an artifact creature until end of turn. And when it attacks, we exile each creature that crewed it, and we return them to the battlefield tapped under our control at the beginning of the next end step. So that means if we have 2 or 3 skeletons, we can have all of them crew the Argosy, and the Argosy will slow flicker them. They'll come back at the beginning of the end step, and they won't come back as skeletons. They will be tapped, but they'll be as they are printed. So we'll have several big creatures that we didn't have to cast at all because we brought them into skeletons. As long as the Argosy survives, we can keep doing that. And if the Argosy doesn't survive, it doesn't have to in order for this trigger to resolve. It just creates a delayed trigger that returns them to the battlefield at the end step. But we sure would like the Argosy to survive so we can keep doing this over and over. Next up, we have Cauldron of Souls. This printing is from the list, but where's this originally from? Shadowmoor, yeah. So 5 generic mana, totally worth it for this card. It's an artifact that says, just tap it, and choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gains Persist until end of turn. We've already seen Persist. When it dies, if it didn't have any -1, -1 counters on it, it comes back with a -1, -1 counter. Getting a -1, -1 counter on so many of our big things, that's fine. Especially because it comes back as it's printed, rather than as a skeleton with no abilities. So Cauldron of Souls, very useful for our cheating things / scamming things, turning our skeletons back into their former selves. But let's also remember, Cauldron of Souls doesn't say choose any number of target creatures you control. So we can use this in a political way. We can say to our opponent, look, I know you're going to lose your creatures if you block, this attack that's coming from a different opponent. I can give them Persist at the very least. What will you give me in the process? Or, hey, we need to try and take out, opponent B. Opponent A, if you attack them with your stuff, you don't have to worry about your stuff staying dead because I will persist them. Yeah, they'll have -1, -1 counters, but we've at least taken out opponent A or their blockers. There's lots of ways to play with Cauldron of Souls that way, or we just use it for ourselves, and it's pretty great for that too. Finally, we have Conjurer's Closet, the simplest one. 5 generic mana for an artifact that says at the beginning of the end step, we flicker something. One of our creatures we control, exile it, return to the battlefield under our control. Maybe we've already attacked with it as a skeleton, but whatever it may be, because we brought it back as a skeleton, it comes back untapped as itself. Conjurer's Closet, even better than Cauldron of Souls, but only one thing at a time. So, worth considering. And of course, there's the timing restriction on it. Cauldron of Souls we can do, on an opponent's turn when they're about to remove something. Conjurer's Closet, we can only do 1 creature and only during our end step, but still very nice. Finally, we have a few cards that supplement the cheats, because there's not that many cheat cards here. But we do have some cards that do straight up reanimation. Like we've already seen Victimize can reanimate some creatures. We've seen how Rescue from the Underworld can reanimate some creatures. Artisan of Kozilek, if we attack with it, or rather, if we cast it, we animate some creatures. But we also have 0 Point Ballad, which is not just a good card, but it also has Xu-Ifit in the flavor text. This is a sorcery for X and a black that says destroy all creatures with toughness X or less. We lose that much life, And if X is 6 or more, we return a creature we put into a graveyard this way to the battlefield under our control. So if we make X 6, then we kill every creature with toughness 6 or less, and we get to bring back, presumably, our commander to get right back to work. But if we have other big creatures we need to deal with, we can pump more into the X. However, we have lots of creatures, even if our creatures are mostly vanilla, that have toughness greater than 6. So we can titrate this, sort of get it exactly where we need it to be, so that our creatures that are huge are likely to stick around, while our opponent's creatures have mostly gone away. And as long as that X is 6, it doesn't matter that our own commander died as well, we can get it right back. In addition, we have one of the rooms from Duskmourn. This is Funeral Room and Awakening Hall. If you haven't seen rooms before, the way they work is they are a split card, but both sides are a permanent. When you cast it, you choose one side, you pay the cost, and it comes in with that half, which is called a door, unlocked. The other side is still locked, and at sorcery speed, you can pay the casting cost to unlock it as well, and now it is an enchantment that has both sets of rule text. So we could play it as the Awakening Hall or play it as the Funeral Room. It comes in and we can pay the cost for whichever other side we haven't done, and it will have the text of that one too. So usually easier to cast the cheaper one first, but you never know. Funeral Room says whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain a life. So it's an enchantment that does that sort of Blood Artist thing, so it's basically Bastion of Remembrance. Pretty good. But Awakening Hall, even better. When we unlock this door, either because we cast it or because we unlocked it when Funeral Room was already on the battlefield, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. They do not come back as skeletons, so we want to make sure we get them into the graveyard before we cast this or unlock this. But pretty nice to see everything come back. It's not casting them, but they're not reanimated as skeletons. They're just reanimated. Pretty nice. I know you're wondering, well, where's Persist? Where's Reanimate? Again, check the Considering section at the bottom of the Moxfield page and you will see it. So before we go into the couple of other categories that I have that are meant to supplement this game plan, let's talk about our support categories. We'll start with Card Advantage, which I have just shorthanded as draw. These are not all necessarily draw spells, they're just Card Advantage spells. So we've seen Deadly Dispute, it draws us 2 cards when we sacrifice a creature, also makes a treasure for us. Key to the City, when it becomes untapped, we can pay 2 generic to draw a card. We haven't seen Mind Stone, but I think probably everyone watching knows what it does. It is 2 generic mana for an artifact that taps for 1 colorless mana, or we can pay 1, tap, and sack it to draw a card. So it's a great mana rock early on, and we can turn it into a card draw later on when we need to. Reckoner's Bargain, of course, 1 and a black, draws 2 cards if we sacrifice a creature. We also gain its mana value in life. Ripples of Undeath is not draw, but we're milling 3, and for 1 mana and 3 life, we can put one of those cards that we milled into our hand. That's Card Advantage. Arch Enemy's Charm is next. I put this in, I was surprised that it was as inexpensive as it is. It's great. For triple black, we get an instant that's modal. We choose one of these. We either exile target creature or planeswalker, just exile them, they're just gone. Return 1 or 2 target creature and or planeswalker cards from our graveyard to our hand. So this is Card Advantage in that it puts 1 or 2 cards in our hand that were in our graveyard. They have to be creatures, but yeah. Or planeswalkers, if you want to make a version of this deck that has planeswalkers in it. Or put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature we control and it gains lifelink until end of turn. So that can be a great way for us to gain a bunch of life if we're not feeling like we need to use Arch Enemy's Charm as removal or as a raised dead. We've seen Ayara. Ayara can tap and sack black creatures to draw cards. We've seen Braids. Braids can force our opponents to sacrifice things, or if they don't, they lose 2 life and we draw. Midnight Reaper, another great classic that they reprinted in Foundations. 2 and a black for a 3/2 zombie knight that says whenever a non-token creature we control dies, this creature deals 1 damage to us and we draw a card. We're happy to take the damage if it means drawing cards when our things die, because when our things die, they come back as skeletons. Clackbridge Troll, of course, if our opponents sacrifice a creature for the beginning of combat trigger, the troll will gain us 3 life and we draw a card. Spectral Snatcher and Troll of Khazad-dûm, both swamp cycle, so that draws us, or doesn't draw, but like it puts a swamp in our hand. And of course, Runescar Demon Demonic Tutors, so that puts another card in our hand. That's enough for card advantage. Let's take a look at our acceleration, which again I've just shorthanded as ramp. It may not all be ramp. Everyone knows Soul Ring. It costs 1, taps for 2, we want it in our deck. Wayfarer's Bauble, love this card, especially in the Edge of Eternity decks, because it's a lander token. 1 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap it and sack it, we ramp it growth. Search our library for a basic, put it in the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Like I say, it's a lander token. Arcane Signet, 2 generic, taps for black. It's a 2-mana rock. Charcoal Diamond is the same thing in this deck, except it comes in tapped. But that kind of redundancy, pretty good. Deadly Dispute and Fake Your Own Death both make treasure. Millikan mills us, but also makes colorless mana. Mind Stone makes colorless mana, we've already seen. Soul Deviatinate is a ritual, as long as we sacrifice our black or artifact creature. Puts a bunch of black mana in our hand, or in our pool rather. And we've seen the Warring Triad, how it does a good impression of the Millikan, but we can add that mana to anyone, and it can be black. But we also have Patriarch's Seal. Patriarch's Seal from Baldur's Gate is a manalith. 3 generic for an artifact that taps for 1 mana of any color, so black. Or we can pay 1 and tap this to untap target legendary creature we control. This is going to be listed later as a synergy piece, and we have a few other things in our considering section that do this same kind of deal. What this is meant to do is give us a way to use Xu-Ifit twice in a turn. If we have 2 big creatures in our graveyard, it only costs us 1 mana and tapping the seal to untap Xu-Ifit after she makes one of those creatures into a skeleton, and now she can tap and make another one into it. Patriarch Seal very nice in those ways. So that is our acceleration. Let's take a look at interaction, which again, just shorthanded as removal. Annihilating Glare, we've seen 1 or 5 to, 1 and sacrifice an artifact creature, or 5 to destroy a creature or planeswalker. Bitter's Triumph, similarly, 2 mana plus discard a card or pay 3 life to destroy a creature or planeswalker. We also have Tragic Slip. Tragic Slip is just 1 black, but it's an instant that gives 1 creature -1/-1. But if a creature has already died this turn, it instead gives them -13/-13, which can kill indestructible things because it just lowers their toughness to 0, assuming it does, and then it dies as a state-based action. We have lots of ways for creatures to die, especially in our deck. Using this at instant speed post-combat, pretty good. But we can also use it. It doesn't say if a creature you control died this turn. So we can use this on an opponent's turn. Maybe they've attacked and done some trading with a different opponent, and we kill a third opponent's creature maybe. Tragic Slip, very useful in this deck. Feed the Swarm. I went back and forth on which one of these I wanted to include. I think this one's better. For 1 and a black, it's a sorcery that says destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls, so that's black enchantment removal. You lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. So we can pay the life, that's fine. If it's something huge and we're losing, 8 life, that's still less than if we had to do it to one of our own things, which maybe we're losing 12 life. We've seen Archenemy's Charm. It can exile creatures and planeswalkers. Soul Innervation. This one's really fun for Murders at Karlov Manor. For 3 and a black, it's an enchantment with flash, and when it enters, target creature gets -4/-4 until end of turn, so that'll kill some things. And whenever 1 or more creature cards leave our graveyard, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So every time we make a skeleton with our commander, a creature card is going from the graveyard to the battlefield, so this is going to trigger and drain our opponents. Persistent Constrictor is removal in that during our opponent's upkeep, this triggers, they lose a life, and we put a 1/1 counter on things. That can kill things over time. It can kill small things. It counts. Shard of the Void Dragon, of course. When it attacks, each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent. And then we have these 3 Eldrazi, which all have Annihilator, which is removal. Now this isn't exactly spot removal, these 4 cards, because they're not letting us choose what we're getting, but it's alright. Something that is a sort of doing a good impression of removal in this deck is the fact that we're attacking with huge, huge things. Again, like with these cards, we're not getting a chance to decide what our opponents are blocking with, but whatever they're blocking with is usually going to die in the process. So we are doing fine on removal, I believe. Finally, we have some Wraths. We've seen them already. 0 Point Ballad is an actual Wrath. We just have to pay quite a bit for it if we are willing to get all the creatures on the board. But of course, we may be able to keep some of ours. And Massacre Worm is a little bit of a light Wrath, but it's got a great payoff for it. So let's go into our supplemental sections. We're going to start with Synergy. I went a little bit back and forth on whether or not to include Illusionist Bracers in this deck, but it's just very good when it comes up. 2 generic mana for an equipment that equips for 3 that says whenever an ability of an equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is really meant to be here to go on Xu-Ifit. Xu-Ifit has an activated ability. If we have the braces on her, it's going to trigger twice instead of just once. So, rather, it's going to go on the stack twice. It's going to be copied, that is. And we'll be able to bring 2 things back. We have a few other creatures with non-mana activated abilities. Maybe Illusionist Bracers goes on them. But I think it's just very powerful when it goes off very well. It's worth having in here. Desecrated Tomb, love this card. One of the first cards I thought of when I started building this deck. For 3 generic mana, we get an artifact that says whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, make a 1/1 bat, it flies. Love it. Just a great token. It blocks flyers that don't have trample. I mean, it blocks the ones that do have trample, but it doesn't stop them. And it just gives us bats. Bats come with each of our skeletons as they walk out of the tomb. I think that's great. We've seen Patriarch Seal. It's synergistic because it can let Xu-Ifit do her thing twice in a turn. Skeleton Crew is synergistic in several ways. We're sort of using the synergy section to represent ways to get multiple activations of Xu-Ifit, ways to get more value when things leave the graveyard, and Anthem effects. The only Anthem effect we actually have remaining in the deck is Skeleton Crew, but if you check the Considering section, you'll see plenty more synergy pieces of these 3 categories. In any case, Skeleton Crew says each other creature you control that's a skeleton or a pirate gets +1/+1. The only skeleton we have in this deck is Skeleton Crew themselves. But it's a 3/3 skeleton pirate for 3 and a black. That makes all of our skeletons we bring back +1/+1. It works because this is layer 7 rather than either of the layers that Xu-Ifit's ability functions in, so we still get the bonus. In addition, whenever 1 or more creature cards leave our graveyard, we make a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token, which will get a bonus from Skeleton Crew's first ability. So these are really 3/3s that we're getting. It only happens when this is on the battlefield, of course, but pretty sweet. Plus, if we want, we can pay 5 and a black to bring this tapped back to the battlefield from the graveyard. So we don't need to even use Xu-Ifit to reanimate the Skeleton Crew. It can do it on its own. And that is not at sorcery speed. So if we have a couple of skeletons attacking in, and our opponents don't expect it, we can pay, I know 6 mana is a lot, but we're not paying any mana to use Xu-Ifit to make things into skeletons, so maybe we have it lying around. We can bring Skeleton Crew back, and suddenly our skeletons have +1/+1. Seems pretty good. It's just worth noting that this is here to remind us that when we use the third ability, the second ability does not trigger. So, we've also seen Soul Derivation and how, like Desecrated Tomb and Skeleton Crew, it triggers when creature cards leave our graveyard by draining our opponent and getting us a life. That's our synergy section. Let's take a look at our tokens. We've got 8 cards to give us tokens. And we have seen all of them already. Desecrated Tomb makes bats when creatures leave our graveyard. Saw in Half will make 2 tokens that are half as big as a creature we destroy. Skeleton Crew makes skeleton pirates. Ghoul-Colored Gisa makes zombie tokens. Dreadfeast Demon makes copies of itself. Triplicate Titan makes kind of copies of itself that are thirds. You know, it makes 3/3/3 golems, one with flying, one with vigilance, one with trample. Ancient Stone Idol, when it dies, makes a 6/2 trampling construct, and Ulamog's Dreadsire can just tap to make a 10/10 Eldrazi. These are pretty good tokens to supplement our skeletons. Next up, we have our drain section. A lot of cards in this, actually. These are just ways for us to get our opponents with some passive damage or passive life loss, in addition to our aggressive attacks. Ayara, of course. Whenever black creatures enter under our control, each opponent loses a life, we gain a life. Braids, if our opponents can't or choose not to sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with one we sacrificed, they lose 2 life, we draw. Soul Innervation, when our stuff leaves our graveyard, or creatures leave our graveyard, we drain each opponent for 1. Gary drains our opponents based on our black devotion. Persistent Constrictor drains each opponent during their upkeep of 1 life. Sir Conrad and Dreadhound drain opponents when we have creatures die or go to our graveyard, or for Sir Conrad, when our creatures leave our graveyard. No, that's a good point. Sir Conrad should be a synergy piece as well. Very nice. Good job, Sir Conrad. Massacre Worm, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. Oh no, what have we done? This is our drain section. And of course, finally, Funeral Room has a little Blood Artist effect as well. When our creatures die, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. Last of these sections, we have an Evasion section. I know you're thinking, why have a section for just 1 card that we've already seen? Because I have other cards that are tagged with Evasion in the Considering section. The only one we have here is Key to the City, which, if we tap it and discard a card, makes one of our creatures unblockable. That's pretty good if we've got big creatures that we're getting in with. Between us and the other players, some opponents are going to get down to low enough life totals that we can just slam in with something big and kill them. It's worth it. That covers all of our spells. We're going to go through our lands, and it won't take too long. We're running 24 basics, so nearly a quarter of our deck are basic swamps. We've got plenty of other lands that we're running, but being able to make sure that we always have black mana available to us, it's important. One of the ways we do that is with Myriad Landscape. It comes in tapped, and it taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to search our library for 2 basic lands that share a land type, which is in this deck, 2 swamps, put them on the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So a little bit slow, but it's just a land, so the cost of inclusion is low, and it is 1 land that becomes 2, so it's a little bit of ramp. Similarly, Temple of the False God is more ramp, it just doesn't work early. Some people really don't like Temple of the False God. I think it's just fine. It's Soul Ring if we have 4 or more other lands. Early on, we can't use it, but this deck is not meant to win early on. This deck is meant to win, period. So we're going to be able to use Temple of the False God to great effect. We just hope we don't have it in our opening hand without some other things. Now we've got 12 more lands that are utility lands. We'll go through these pretty quickly. They kind of come in different similar categories. Bonder's Enclave taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and tap it to draw a card, but only if we have a creature with power 4 or greater. I don't usually put Bonder's Enclave in a deck that doesn't have a commander with power 4 or greater, but we have so many instances of having big creatures in this deck. The likelihood that we're going to get through a game that we're not just, stuck on lands badly the whole time without having something huge, Bonder's Enclave is going to draw us cards. Castle Octwain also will draw us cards. It enters tapped unless we control a swamp, but we'll control a swamp. It taps for black, or we can pay 1 and double black and tap it to draw a card, and then we lose life equal to the number of cards in our hand, which usually isn't that much, but even if we're losing 5 or 6 life, sometimes that's worth a card. It works for me. Similarly, we have War Room, which is taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and tap it, and life equal to the number of colors in our commander's color identity, which is to say 1, to draw a card. So this is a little easier to pay for to draw a card than Castle Octwain is, but doesn't tap for black. Demolition Field I include in most of my decks because you want to have a little bit of land removal just in case someone's running something really scary. Maybe they're getting a huge amount of value out of their Susur Secundi or out of their Rogue's Passage or, something else like that. Maybe they're drawing a lot of cards off their Bonder's Enclave. Demolition Field taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to blow up a non-basic our opponent controls, and then they get to find a basic and put it in untapped, and so do we. So neither of us is down a land. They're just down whatever really annoying utility land they were using was. Or maybe I don't know, maybe you're playing with someone who's playing an Ancient Tomb. Gyreach Sanitarium is a legendary land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it, and everyone loots. Everyone draws and then discards. This is a great way for us to get scary big creatures in our graveyard. Looting is pretty good for everyone. It's probably best for us, or at least better than average. I'm running a high market in the Stellar Sights frame because it was not expensive and it looks just great. It taps for colorless, or we can tap it and sacrifice a creature to gain a life. That's not very much, but it puts creatures in our graveyard, and sometimes that's what we want. Just a little bit of value. Remember, you can also do something like, I don't know, maybe you have a skeleton and you cast Fake Your Own Death on that skeleton, and then just use high market to sacrifice it, and it comes back as its original self rather than a skeleton. Seems good. Midgar, City of Mako, is a tap land, comes in tapped and taps for black, but also it has an adventure. So before we have cast this, while this is in our hand, we can cast it as a sorcery, which is Reactor Raid. We may sacrifice an artifact or creature, and if we do, we draw 2 cards. That's a good sacrifice outlet for us. If we cast Reactor Raid, this card will go into exile, and we can then play it from exile as essentially as though it were in our hand. So if we haven't made our land drop yet, we can then play it as Midgar. It'll come in tapped and tap for black. But if it's already in play, we can't cast the sorcery. That's not how sorceries work. You have to do this from your hand. Next up is Rogue's Passage. People know Rogue's Passage. Taps for colorless, or pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. That's just as good on Rogue's Passage as it is on Key to the City. Sometimes we just need to get in with some unblockable damage. Next we have Susur Secundi, Void Altar, which is where our commander is located. Susur Secundi is a planet. It comes in tapped and it taps for black, but it has Station, which means we can tap creatures at sorcery speed to put charge counters on Susur Secundi. And once it has 12 or more charge counters, it gains an extra ability. That ability is for 1 and a black and tap and pay 2 life and sacrifice a creature. We draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. We can only do that as a sorcery, but this is very strong. And stationing up to 12 in this deck is child's play. We can do that with 2 creatures. Generally, that's all we need. Yeah. Next up, we have the Dross Pits. This is just a cheap way to draw cards if we need to. It is a land, comes in tapped, taps for black, or we can pay 1 and a black, tap and sacrifice this to draw a card. If we need more cards, we're probably going to have a lot of basic swamps floating around. The Dross Pits gets us to the next thing. We have Tocasia's Dig Site as well from the Brothers' War. It taps for colorless, or we can pay 3 and tap it to surveil 1. Surveil is great for card selection, but it also puts things in our graveyard. So being able to use this, maybe we have done this on our opponent to the right's end step, we know what's on top of our library, and we know that we want to keep it there, but maybe we change our mind. We use this during our upkeep step. We put it in our graveyard, we draw something different. That's a crazy use of it, but you could do that. Next, from Warhammer 40k, we have the Tomb Fortress. It is another tap land, taps for black, or we can pay 2 and triple black and tap it and exile it. But if we do, we mill 4 cards and return a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield, just as a sorcery. So this is on a land, self-mill and reanimation. Seems really good. It doesn't even require that the creature we bring back be one of the ones we milled. Tomb Fortress seems very good in this deck. Finally, we have War Room, which we've already seen. So as you can see, these utility lands are mostly about drawing us cards, giving us a way to sacrifice our creatures, or just giving us a little bit of extra value if we may need it. So that about sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Edge of Eternities commander decks every Thursday until the Spider-Man set drops at the end of this month. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific commander or playstyle. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.